welcome back Down Below. I'm Ian.
I'm Steve.
Today we are going to establish for you how you can run some different styles of campaign, but actually we're going to start with what do we mean by different styles of campaign.
Up to this point, we've been talking largely about our default assumptions for the world, which is good. You can't really learn much about different parts of a world unless you learn about the default basics, and so we've spent some time establishing some assumptions about Downbelow, establishing some assumptions about the rest of it, and establishing assumptions about stuff that player characters do. And at this point, we're actually going to start just flipping everything over and talking about other things, because for every interesting episode of Dirty Jobs, there are 5 or 6 different television shows that do tell stories of more different and interesting things. So rather than taking the route that a lot of games do and saying, no, this is the only thing we're going to give you ideas for, we're actually going to start at this point giving you, well, on my side, we're going to start giving you story ideas, and on Ian's side, we're going to start doing some mechanical ideas on how you can support different campaign styles. I'm going to take this...
So a couple of caveats. One, the core genre of the setting is going to remain a dystopian, cyberpunk sort of sci-fi.
Nothing's going to change about that.
And 2, the general themes of the game are going to remain intact, so you're still going to be looking at certain things that we've talked about in previous videos that are relatively immutable facets of the setting. Those are still going to be relatively immutable, but we're going to look at the setting from different angles that ask different questions of your players than the ones that we've been focusing on so far.
One of our design goals in this long-running series is that, well, we plan to not invalidate anything that we've talked about. So anything that we've mentioned is true or factual, unless we go back and explicitly say, hey, that was an earlier design document. We're planning to straight up leave open. So if we've said it, it remains true. What I'm talking about here is, this is going to be a 2-part, and I'm going to mention one thing, and then Ian's going to mention another. I'll go into what I'm talking about this week. Leave tomorrow's statement for Ian to talk about why he's doing what he is. So what I'll be talking about in the setting portion is basically a basic story structure and the basic conflicts, the basic questions, and the natural climax of the story arcs that are powered by this particular campaign system. So instead of everyone having to come in and establish who they are through gameplay, these ideas are going to give both potential GMs and potential players an idea of where they might want to start. Each of these could be used for a whole group or could be used for individual players. It really is up to the group dynamic. There are some groups that thrive on each individual character having their story arc, and this would be perfectly well suited for GMs who have the capability to plan and juggle and work with their characters to have each character fit one of these campaign models. There are other groups that see a more holistic sense and say that the group itself is the thing following the story arc and following the plan. Again, each of these would be perfect for it. It's just a matter of finding the one that matches your group's needs and preferences.
So before we close for today, do you want to say a word about buy-in?
Oh, sure. Now, a very important thing about role-playing games in general is the concept of, well, just like Ian said, the concept of buy-in, the concept of willing suspension of disbelief. Everyone knows that you're not actually these adventurers going out and slaying dragons, or if you don't, that is a serious problem and should have serious psychological help behind it.
But the important thing is, especially when you're introducing different styles of play within the same game system, for everybody to be on the same page about what you're pretending to do.
To use Dungeons & Dragons as the perfect example, when the Dungeon Master has prepped an 8-story dungeon for the group to adventure through, and at the entrance of the dungeon, one of the characters says, you know, my character is claustrophobic, I really wouldn't go down there. And another one says, hey, that's right, and I'm a wilderness ranger, I think I'm going to go off that way instead. And a third says, and I'm a bard, I'm going to go back to this village and start earning money by playing songs. And you're left with only one person who actually is planning to go down into the dungeon that the DM spent hours working on. that's a surefire way to either ruin a campaign or possibly even kill a group. And while individuals may have fun playing their characters there, there's agency that's not being respected across the board. The concept of buy-in is very important, and the more story-driven your game is, the more you want to make sure, both as a player and as a DM, that everyone important to your story is on the same page with what it is you are setting out to do. Once the game starts, let what happens happens, but if you're there to crawl through a dungeon, make sure everyone's on the same page that we are here to crawl through a dungeon.
So, we will talk about preparing yourself to run the system the way you'll need it for the campaign of your choice tomorrow, and general things that can change even though you're using the same basic system.
Until then,
thanks for falling through the cracks with us.